3 True World War Horror Stories. Number 3. The Lost Battalion. It was October 1918 when a group of American soldiers were trapped behind enemy lines in the Argonne forest of France. This event became known as the Lost Battalion. At the time, the United States had been fighting in World War I for just over a year, and this particular group of men were part of the 77th Infantry Division, who were sent over to help the French army take back some land from the Germans. But things did not go according to plan. After a bit of confusion and miscommunication between officers, the American troops found themselves separated and stuck deep behind enemy lines with no way out. They had no choice but to stay in the forest for an entire week while they waited to be rescued. It was a terrifying ordeal, and the men slept in shifts so that at least someone was always awake to keep watch for any German soldiers. Luckily, one man kept a diary of the experience. This is what he wrote. "We spent 4 days without food and 3 nights without sleep. We were too exhausted to march and too hungry to do anything but curse our fate. On the 5th day, we started to move again. We traveled all day, and at 6:30 p.m. reached a road leading to our dressing station. When we arrived there, we collapsed from exhaustion and hunger. We were given food and water and first aid and then left to rest. So we rested. We slept for 14 hours. I never slept so long at one time before or since." Eventually, after 7 whole days, the American troops were finally able to link up with their fellow soldiers and retreat back to safety. There were only 200 men in this battalion, and by the time they made it back, only 57 were still able to walk. Out of the 200 men, only 57. Many of them died from starvation, dehydration, and exhaustion. The Lost Battalion became one of the most famous stories of World War I, and was even turned into a movie in 1932. But to me, the craziest part of this story isn't even what I just told you. According to historical records, the American commander in charge of the 77th Division at the time received orders to retreat on October, the same day that the men were lost. But somehow these orders never made it to the troops on the ground. They weren't officially relieved of their duty to capture the forest until October, meaning that if the commander had simply done his job and passed on the order to retreat, then the Lost Battalion wouldn't have had to suffer for an entire extra week. More than 100 lives would have been saved. Instead, they were given orders to advance, which led to hundreds of deaths. What is the most messed up part? That's right, the Lost Battalion was actually 2 battalions. While the 77th Infantry Division was indeed separated into smaller groups, the official order to retreat applied only to the 1st Battalion. Somehow the order got mixed up, and the 2nd Battalion, the one whose members kept the diary, were not informed until a full week later. Number 2. Nazi Cannibal. In September of 1943, a group of Jewish prisoners at Auschwitz were being held in a small wooden hut while they waited to be transported to one of the gas chambers. One of these men managed to escape and run away into the nearby forest. He had heard rumors that outside of the camp there was an underground resistance movement that could help him get away, but he was wrong. No one wanted to help him. He spent 6 weeks hiding in the woods, eating berries and drinking water from streams, until he was eventually caught and brought back to the camp. That's where things get really messed up. He wasn't taken straight to the gas chambers like you might expect. Instead, the guards tied him up and locked him in a small cell, all by himself. Every single day he was offered food and water, but he refused to eat or drink anything until the Nazis decided to perform terrible experiments on him. They injected him with all sorts of substances and observed what happened to his body. Then they cut him open and examined his organs. To make things worse, the guards would bring people from the village nearby to come and watch them experiment on him. These people paid admission by bringing the Nazis food or tools they needed for their work. Finally, the Jewish prisoner was killed, but his suffering didn't end there. The Nazis chopped up his body into pieces and fed those pieces to people in the village, turning them into cannibals. They also sold some of his body parts to doctors and medical schools, basically selling a human body in pieces on the black market. Remember, this was happening in 1943. We don't know exactly how many people ended up eating this man, or what they did with the rest of his body after they cut it up, but we do know that this horrific incident took place. One of the worst parts of the Holocaust was that it wasn't just the Jews who suffered. It's estimated that around 5 million civilians and prisoners were persecuted and murdered by the Nazis. This included people of Jewish descent, political rivals, gay people, people with disabilities, and anyone else who didn't fit in. These people were tortured and experimented on, and some were even used as food. No. 1. Medical experiments. In 1935, Adolf Hitler came to power and began his quest to conquer Europe and rule the world. Part of his master plan involved creating a master race of super soldiers, and he wanted to start this master race by improving the genetic quality of children. Hitler commissioned doctors to find ways to increase intelligence, strength, and overall fitness through surgery. This meant that thousands of babies born in Germany between 1935 and 1945 were secretly operated on without their parents or the public knowing. But the purpose of these surgeries was not to cure diseases. The purpose was to eliminate diseases. Children with disabilities like cleft palates, club feet, epilepsy, or other conditions that made them different were secretly taken away from their parents and killed. Sometimes they were given lethal injections, but more often than not, they were used for medical experiments. Doctors stitched up hernias and then infected the wounds so they would get bigger and bigger, causing the child to die. They gave children diseases and then watched as they burned from the inside out. They shot bullets into their heads to see what would happen. They sewed up babies alive just to see how long they would survive. And to top it all off, these experiments were performed without anesthesia. The doctors only stopped when Germany lost the war and Hitler's regime came crumbling down. But before that, they had created some truly horrific medical breakthroughs. Some of the biggest discoveries they made included the fact that injecting morphine into the heart stops the heart. Babies with heart defects can live for up to 10 days without a heart. And it's possible to remove a human eye without killing the person. Well, maybe don't call them breakthroughs, because they're actually really disgusting. If you want to hear more about World War II, stay tuned.